Leaders of the group of 7 nations meeting in Quebec in Canada over the next 2 days will pressure the United States president on the tariffs that he's imposed on imports of steel and aluminium, sparking fears of a trade war that could undermine global economic growth. This as President Cyril Ramaphosa jets off tonight to join other developing world leaders, hoping not to be overshadowed by the current narrative emanating from Washington. President Donald Trump's America First policy and the imposition of protectionist measures on even their closest allies, for that matter, including host Canada and the European Union, have pundits calling for a showdown in Canada.
It's a picturesque setting for this gathering of the world's most industrialized nations, providing a canvas amidst tight security for pushback from some of America's closest allies.
In this context, above all, we have to remain polite, productive, and try to be convincing to keep the United States on board, because they're our historical ally and we need them. But on substance, we'll never give in.
Macron is among the first G7 leaders to arrive in Canada for what some are calling a strategy session with his Canadian host, as concerns linger about US actions on the global economy and geopolitical concerns like withdrawing from the Iran nuclear deal that has isolated Washington among its G7 colleagues.
Les 6 autres pays du G7.
I will repeat to President Trump what we've just explained here, that measures taken are counterproductive, including for his own economy. For me, it's a question of principle. We can't wage a trade war between allies. We are all engaged in conflicts in Syria, in Iraq, in the Sahel, and in other places in the world. We are allies, and we exchange critical information. Our soldiers stand together to protect freedom and our values. In the international context we face today, we can't have a trade war. It's a question of principle. Along with Prime Minister Trudeau and all of our partners, I will try to convince him to find a way back to normal on trade issues, because we need to resolve this tension.
But Trump is unlikely to back down, with some calling his recent actions part of a broader strategy to obtain better trade deals for the United States.
Well, look, we're talking everything through. There may be disagreements. I regard this as much like a family quarrel. I'm always the optimist. I believe it can be worked out. But, you know, and I'm always hopeful on that point. This is a G7 meeting, and the presidents and heads of state will get together.
The summit has 5 broad themes: inclusive growth and creating jobs for a future digital economy, climate change with a particular focus on the oceans economy, a peaceful and secure world, gender equality and women's empowerment. And in G7 tradition, protests expected to turn out en masse over the next 3 days against capitalism, access to quality education, climate change and gender issues.
Women around the world do 2 to 10 times more unpaid care work than men do. And that obviously stops them earning at the same rate. But also it stops them participating in public life, getting involved in politics and the media, and also hinders their well-being.
In a world increasingly at odds with itself. South Africa's head of state arrives in Canada early Friday morning, a first stop in Toronto where he'll engage with investment and business leaders as part of his drive to raise $100 billion in new investments over the next 5 years. He'll then travel on to Quebec City here and then on to Charlevoix, the summit retreat venue, where he'll engage in a discussion with the group of 7 leaders around the ocean's economy and conservation, an area that Pretoria has earmarked as a new growth pole for the South African economy as part of Operation Pakisa. Sherwin Bryceby's SABC News, Quebec City, Canada.